All right. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Brenny. If I haven't talked to you before in person, it's nice to see you virtually. I do a lot of conversing with you all over email, so it's nice to put some names and faces together. And our session today is going to focus on some tools within itslearning and a little bit outside of itslearning as well to help boost efficiency and support you in this different school year, as we know it's very different than we had in years past. And hopefully you walk away with some ideas on how to use itslearning tools a little bit differently or how to streamline your workflows when you're using it. So I put my slides in the chat for you to reference, but if you wanted to pull those up, there is a bit.ly short link here. So if you type that into your browser, you can pull it up. I will say that because we're talking about itslearning, I do have lots of screenshots and tutorial videos in the slide deck, but I'll probably spend more time actually in the platform than on the slide deck. So I won't follow it step by step by step, but I like to give you the slides and guides as resources so you can kind of go through those at your own pace later on. All right. So if you have questions at any point during this, feel free to just drop those in the chat. Happy to answer those, happy to help out. Nick's here to kind of help me facilitate some of those questions as well, because sometimes when you're presenting, you can't click on the messages as quickly as you usually could if you were an in-person session. But our goals for today are to learn how you can use itslearning to streamline your workflow, ideally to support your executive functions as a teacher and to support executive functions and engagement for your students, and to practice utilizing some of these tools in your own learning environment, whether that's in the classroom or if you're in like a counseling position or a student services position, using those tools and what you've learned in those settings. All right, so before I get too far into this, I want to say thank you for everything that you've been doing. I know this school year has been unique in lots of different ways, and I appreciate you being so flexible. I know that there's been some hiccups with itslearning on a global scale as more and more school districts are learning online and using it than ever before. It's definitely caused some slower loading time and speed than what we typically would like. So I just want to say thank you for being patient and flexible as we work through those. And I appreciate all of you because of that. All right. So we are going to start diving in to some of these tools and resources in itslearning. So if you are a secondary teacher, which we have a few in here, we have a few elementary, there are some tools on itslearning that maybe you might want to use to kind of streamline all of the students that you manage. And this works for elementary as well. So on itslearning, there are course groups. Secondary teachers, the course groups are automatically made for you. It's based on your class periods that you have students, or here at East, the mods that you see students during the day, and that's all driven through PowerSchool. Some of them are still being worked on, I will say that. There were some fluid rosters at the start of school year, as we know, and some of your students are still being updated and fixed there, but you actually have the ability to add your own course groups and customize the names of those so that you can send messages to just a particular group of students. So you can send it to just a bridge group of students, or maybe some who are out, maybe they're quarantining at home and you have a couple of students in your class, you don't have to type out all of their names. You can put them in a group and then just send them a message that way. But there's also additional benefits to using the course groups feature, in that you can use it to assign specific folders and resources to that group. So you only want a certain folder to be available to students who are in the bridge program, you can make that folder available to them. Or you can even use it for group work. So maybe you're doing a group project and your students have selected different topics. You can assign the topic that goes with group one to group one. So it's a kind of a little hidden feature on itslearning that you can customize and make your own a little bit more than what it commonly looks like. So I'm going to dive in and show you how to do that. So I am going to abandon my slides here for a second, and we're going to go into the platform. So you'll have to be logged in, and you'll go to any one of your itslearning courses through your drop-down menu. I'm kind of in a sample course right now. There's not a whole lot in this course, but there are a few things. And across your top navigation bar here on itslearning, there's the More button, and then course groups is an option there. And if you have course groups there. I'm actually going to pull up another course here, another window to show you an example of what this looks like when there's more students in the course. But here's an example of a secondary teacher. He has all these different class periods during the day, and those are the students that are in those specific groups. So if you're looking at this menu right now, there's several different options here. You don't want to delete any of these course groups. I will say that, especially if they're the ones that are automatically in here and created for you. Secondary teachers, those are your different class periods. You don't want to delete those because that eliminates your ability to sort through those groups. But you can select a group and send them a specific message. But you can also create groups as well. So I'm going to go back to my course here, and let's say that I want to make a group for my bridge students. I know I already had one there, but I'm going to add another one. All right, so I click create, give it a title, next, and then from this screen, it shows me all of the people who are enrolled in my course. So if you have teachers in your course, it will show them too. But what I want to do is select the students that need to be in this bridge group. So select the student and I'll click complete when I've added all the students that I need to. If you wanted to mass add a lot of students at once, click the name button and then just deselect or select more as you need to and click complete. It tells you that the group was made. You can change the title if you need to. You can add more participants and even more subgroups, and you can send them messages from here if you wanted to. So that's just kind of a helpful piece to know that if you need to communicate with a lot of students at once, but maybe not the whole class, from the more in course groups menu is where you can select a group of students and send that group a message. And this one only has one student in it. But if I had multiple, it would have all of their names right there and I could type the message and let them know what they needed to do for the day. Right, so that's kind of a cool feature there and helps you organize information as well. The other helpful thing with course groups is if I have assignments in my course, like here's a couple of examples that I already made. Here's some note-taking activities. Whenever it finally loads. I don't think I've added the right permissions on this yet, but if I add an assignment, I can sort by that course group as well whenever I have their submissions. So instead of having to go through one by one and see my students' responses from there, I can filter by group and then it shows all of my students here, and I can sort by my first period class or my bridge students or however you've arranged the students in your course, all right? So that's an example of how to use that to kind of help manage your workflow as a teacher. Other helpful things related to course groups, kind of starting you off there because we're going to build onto that. And on my slide deck, I walk you through everything I just showed you. But the registration tool is a way for you to create course groups, but kind of put a little bit of that course creation, course group creations bit in the power of your students. So specifically, is the grouping possible in Power Teacher? Denise, that's a really good question, and I'm going to do some follow-up on that. I know right now I don't think there's a label in Power School to show that a student's a bridge student at the secondary level, but that's a really good question. So I'm making a note to myself to follow up on that. But you can create your own if that helps some. But if you wanted to have your students maybe designate that they are a bridge student or wanted to have course groups made based on what students are saying, there's this really awesome tool on itslearning that I'll admit I did not use when I was in the classroom, and I really wish I would have known about it. I don't know why I didn't use it, but it's amazing, and it's called the registration tool. And like the name implies, it allows your students to register for something. And the way that you can use this in the classroom is you can use it to register students to put them into groups. It can be used for signups. So if you have office hours and maybe you wanted to have students schedule one-on-one meetings with you, maybe you're an elementary bridge teacher and in the afternoon is when you have that time block where students are working independently, they can schedule a time through the registration tool to meet with you. You can also use it to put students into groups based on maybe a research topic they want to explore, maybe selecting presentation dates. It's really, really dynamic in how you use it. And it's really just limited by your creativity. All right, so to do that, you'll go to your course, and I'll show you an example here in a second, but we're going to practice building a registration using the registration tool. So if I'm back in my course, I can click the add button here under resources, the tab I'm on where you build anything and everything on It's Learning. Or if I click the add button in the top right, it's not in the short list, but if I click show all and scroll a little bit further down the page, it's under activities below the hangman game and it's registration. All right. And the way that you go about setting this up is it's helpful if you give it a title. By default, it just says new registration. So for this example, we'll do research project topics. All right. So if I'm doing a research project with my students and I want to see what topic they want to study, and maybe I use what they've selected to put them into groups, I can use this tool. So give them instructions there, and you don't have a character limit, so you can type out quite a bit if you needed to. And then here are their choices, okay? So I was social studies, so I'm gonna default to that. Maybe choice one is ancient civilizations unit. If I needed to add more than just the default 2 options, I can click add new. All right, so those are some of my options there. I can keep adding more and more if I needed to. The unique thing is over here on the right, there's this seats button, and you can actually set a limit on the number of students that could select ancient China for their topic. So if I wanted to keep my group sizes at a certain number, then I can actually kind of have some control over how many students can sign up for this. So maybe I just want to do 2, and then only do 3 there. All right, so I put that many seats, getting that set up there. And then here are some additional options here. I really like this, especially if you're using this tool for students to explain maybe why they're picking a research topic, or if you're using it for them to schedule a conference time with you. If you select participants must explain their choices, then as soon as the student picks that they want to do the research project on ancient Japan, a little text box comes up to them and they have to type out a few sentences saying why they selected that answer. So if you're doing this with students to schedule a conference, maybe they type out their questions that they wanted to ask you so that you can prepare for that and you kind of know what you're going to talk about before you start that meeting. You can toggle that on, and then you can make it to where students can see each other's choices. I typically don't mark that because if you're using this to put students into groups, maybe you don't want that to drive why they pick the topic they do, or maybe you do, it's up to you. And then here you can set some limits on the number of choices they can pick. I usually just leave it at the default, but if you wanted them to maybe rank a couple of them, they can pick 2. Deadline here if you want it. They can edit their choices if you want them to be able to, but I usually just leave all those as they are. And click save. All right, so I'm still in the teacher view here. I'm going to toggle over to student view here in a second, but this is the example of what it looks like if I go to registrations. This is the helpful thing in the teacher view, especially if you have lots of students. It shows me here how many students have selected that option. And I can even download those in Excel files. And the neat thing is that if I have multiple students in my class and they pick all these different groups, I can make course groups based on their answers. So let's say I'm doing this research project and I have 3 students that picked Molly, then that's going to be my group that does that. They're going to be working together for this research project. So I can make that course group there. And I know that if I have to send out any news related to their topic, I can send them a message through course groups. And I can even give them a specific folder of resources on It's Learning because they're in that group. And that's the next thing I'm going to show you. All right, so this is the teacher view on this. All right, if I go over, I'm going to open up a new window here, so I might have to screen share a different one. All right, I hope you all can see this. It should be a slightly different view because I'm in here as a student. Let me know if I'm not showing the right screen. I have a tendency to do that and get ahead of myself, and then people are like, we have no idea what you're talking about. All right, so if I'm in here as a student now. I wanted to show you what this looks like from that view. Right, so I would go here and I click register. And then I get to pick which research topic I want to do. And then here's a little text box where the student can explain why they want to pick that option. Confirm registration. And then they're good to go. And I'm going to go back over to my teacher view. Maybe. All right, there we go. And if I go back over to my teacher view for this research project, now I can see that student's choice here. And then I can make course group based on that. And it puts the student in that group. So that's a pretty awesome feature. Now, the other helpful thing here is that because we have so many students who are maybe in and out of the classroom, they're transitioning from quarantining or they're transitioning into quarantining, it might be helpful to make folders for those students, or maybe even just to use this feature if you're doing research projects and you want to give students a folder of resources relevant to their topic. You can change the permissions on folders on itslearning to where only a certain group of students can access it and participate in the items in that folder. So I would really recommend doing this for your bridge students if you're a secondary teacher, or if you want to work on putting your students into different groups. It's really helpful. Just know that with permissions, there's a lot that can go wrong really quickly. So always make sure that if you're doing this, that you follow the instructions that are kind of on the screen, and that if you're curious if you set it up right or not, just have a colleague look over it, or even have a student test it first before you're going to roll it out to the whole class. And I can always look over that for you too. But there have been instances where a teacher has accidentally toggled with the permissions in a course and then none of the students can see it. That's an easy fix that I'll show you, but it's just a helpful thing to have in your mind's eye when you go through and kind of toggle with those settings. So the way to do this, the most efficient way to go about it, is to make a folder. And if you make the folder, then you can change the permissions in that folder to where only certain students can see it and participate in it. And then if you add anything to that folder, automatically inherits those same permission settings. So to add a folder on itslearning, you can go through the add button here or in the top right, and it's the first thing that pops up. Right, so I'm just going to name this after that research project group we were talking about, leave this the way it is, and I'll click save. I'm not going to add anything to this folder yet because I just want to get this setup piece out of the way. And the way that I can change the permissions here to my students that selected this as their project, I'll go over here, and right below the add button, there's a little 3-dot menu, and it's called the function button on itslearning. And if I click that, I have a couple of options here, but I'm going to select permissions. And I have even more options here as well. And what you want to do is select the first one, which says select who can see and participate in this folder. So I'll pick that. And remember, we made those course groups a few minutes ago. It's showing all of those course groups here, so I can select that I want the Ancient Egypt group to have access to this folder. If you haven't made course groups, you can also toggle this to participants and then only select the participants that you want to have access to this. So that's another option, because I know at the elementary level they don't use course groups as often, but this could be a way that you could just assign it to the students that you need to. And I'll click group that I want to have access to. So I'll select them and then click add. They're over here on the right, so they're good to go. And I'll click save. All right, so it told me that they now have the ability to participate. This group does. And I always like to double check that I've set it up correctly, because sometimes, you know, you miss a step and that happens. If I click this second option here where it says see the current permissions of Ancient Egypt group, it gives me a view here on who has access to this folder called Ancient Egypt group. So I can see that Me as the teacher does, my administrator does, that profile set, but only this group of pupils can participate and read, which is the settings that you want. All right, so now if I add any pieces to this folder, like maybe it's an assignment, create it, only the students who are in this group can see it, all right? And it only shows that student here is being a possible student to submit the work. So that's a helpful thing to know as you go through and do this. And I'm just going to show you back over in the student view one more time. I'm signed in as that student over here on my tab. And there were some bridge folders here in my teacher view. I set up the permission on those so that student doesn't have access to those. So I'm imagining the student isn't a bridge student, but the student is in this ancient Egypt group. So he would have access to all these resources and things there as he needs them. Kind of another option there for using that tool. Go back to my teacher view. And the last little bit here that I wanted to show you to help you kind of manage your workflow and all the different resources and things that are coming your way this year is using the It's Learning assignment tool to help save yourself some time. So like the name implies, it is intended to be a place for you to have students turn in their work and for you to organize it all in one place. And I strongly recommend doing that. If you're having students turn in any type of digital work, the assignment tool in It's Learning is the way to go because you can turn in anything to the assignment tool. Links, text, Word documents, PowerPoints, Google Docs, Google Slides, anything and everything can be turned in there. So it kind of makes it a little bit easier for you to give students options all in one tool. The other thing that's helpful with this specific tool is that you can integrate Google resources, so docs and slides and sheets, and then you can use the assignment tool to send students their own copies of those resources. So if you want to save yourself some time and send students maybe a framework for writing an essay, and it's a Google Doc, and it's an essay writing template, instead of having them click File, make a copy in that Google Doc, or request access to it, and then you get a lot of different emails, you can have It's Learning do that work for you by having it make a copy for them. Same thing for checklists. Maybe if you want to start using checklists for your students, they can keep track of their work and their assignments, which is really good for bridge students because they're away from your classroom and can't physically check in with you that way. You can use checklists like Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets and give them checklists in that way. And this tool can give them their own copy where they have the ability to mark off the things that they've completed. And I had a really good question from a teacher a couple weeks ago when I talked about this. And she said, I want to give my students their own Google Doc that has our vocab words on it, but it's not necessarily like an assignment that is homework. And I don't want them to think that it's a homework assignment because of that. What should I do? And I said, well, you can use the assignment tool, but you don't have to put a deadline on it. And you don't have to tell them that it's an assignment. You can just say that this is your learning resource for the day, or this is your checklist, so that maybe it doesn't have that same connotation, but it's still giving you a streamlined way to give students resources and their own copies of it. So if you do want to use that feature, it's super helpful. And I'm actually just going to walk you through really quickly how to do that and how you can quickly see student work on that. It is the most popular tool on It's Learning. So if you're on It's Learning and you click Add an Assignment, when it loads, there we go. It is the first one that pops up in that Add menu. So add my title here. I can put my assignment description here. You can add audio and video, lots of other options here. So it's a little bit more dynamic and giving your students options for representation there. You can set a deadline if you need to, or you don't have to if you don't want it to seem like it's that type of work for students. But down here, add files is where you're going to associate whatever Google resource you want to be made a copy for your students. So if I'm here, I'll click Google Drive. And the first time you do this, it will walk you through some setup questions to pair your Google Drive with It's Learning, which you'll want to do. But after that, if I want to find my file, I just have to look for its name. There's going to be a lot of them that come up for this because I use this one almost every time I demo this tool. There it is. So this is the vocabulary activity I want for my students. So I'll find it and I'll click select. All right, and after I found whatever Google file I needed to, there is options here in this little drop-down menu. So by default, it's set to where students can view it, which means they don't have their own copy yet, where they can write on it and make it their own. So what I need to do in the drop-down menu is make a copy for each student. That way, whenever a student clicks this, they can edit this and do what they need to do. And I'll click Create Assignment. And it usually does take it a second, just to warn you whenever you do add a Google resource, because it's adding quite a bit of settings to that. All right. And I'm going to go back over to student view so we can look at that here in a second. So this is what it looks like in my teacher view. And if I wanted to see what resource I linked, I click it, opens it in a new window. Okay. I'm going to toggle into student view. We get the full experience. Right. So for the students, what they see when they click on this assignment is they see this attached file there, my instructions, and when they click answer assignment, in a new window, it's going to open the Google file that I added there. It's going to name this file after me, my student. So you don't get any no-name assignments turned into you, which is nice. And now I have my own version of this where I can write on it, edit, do whatever I need to. And whenever I'm ready to turn this into my teacher, I'll just go back over here to this open tab on It's Learning. And I just click Submit. Or I can open it back up again. If I need to, it keeps it here. I don't have to dig through my Google Drive and try and find it and reattach it. It saves it. If you're a teacher and you want to be able to see and quickly access your students' Google Drive files, I will say that the It's Learning view on any Google integrated assignment answer is not the most efficient. So if you want to be able to quickly access student work, it's actually easier if you jump over to your Google Drive to do that. I know I'm about out of time, so this is the last thing I'm going to show you, and then we'll do questions. So if I open up my teacher view right now, I open up my Google Drive. Anytime I make a Google integrated assignment on It's Learning makes a folder and names it after my assignment and then shares that folder with me on Google Drive. Technically, It's Learning is the owner of that folder and all of those Google resources because it created it for the students. And that also makes it so that whenever you do put an assignment deadline on there, it shuts down students' access to it so they can't be editing that after the deadline. But to get to my students' answers, I'll go to my Google Drive, and then over here on the left-hand side, I'll click Shared with Me. We'll see if this loads. All right, here we go. And there'll be a folder here that It's Learning made. It shows lots of them that it's already made there for me, named after the assignment. And if I double click that folder to open it, I'll have two subfolders, one that has my original template in it, and then any of my student answers. So if I had students who would click this, it puts me as a student there because I viewed it as a pupil, it would show all of their resources. I could see all 20 to however many students you have in your class right here, and I could just easily pop in, be looking at their Google Doc while they're working on it, give them feedback if I need to, and just kind of check their progress. If you don't see a student's name here, that means that they haven't opened the assignment yet. That's kind of a quick way to go through and scan student work and check in with them in real time. And then the other things we added on this slide deck were just how-to guides for everything I just showed you and how to make a checklist as well. So now is the time, if you have questions, feel free to ask. I'm going to double check the chat. And hopefully if you have questions, I can answer those right now too. I know that you probably have some It's Learning related ones. It's been a little bit since I've had a PD and been able to connect with you guys. Yeah, thanks for being here, Autumn. It was good to virtually see you. Yeah, thank you guys for being here. You will get your PGPs after this session. I will send those to you via email. It'll be a little PDF that you can save in your Google Drive and then upload into the licensing verification system if you need to. Same if you attended Nick's session as well. They'll both come from me.